Welcome back, fellow Earthlings. My name is Rogan, and you're watching The Mysterious Stoner in Ebola. Last time we left off with me finishing the end of this year with a group of guys that I had spent, I believe it was 2017 with, 17 or 18, one of those two, I think. But we came to the end of the year, everyone was being asked on the team, what do you think you're going to do afterwards for a career, or if you're going to go on another circuit of visiting churches, what are you going to do? So, being the good Christian that I was, I prayed and asked God what He would have me do with the rest of my life. And that still small answer came to me and told me to join the United States Marines. And after a brief bit of arguing, I finally agreed to go along with it. And I began to literally answer everyone that asked me from then on. The Lord is telling me, or has told me, that is leading me to join the United States Marines. I would say something along those lines. Wouldn't tell them how I was told this, or why I was led to believe this, because that would have been just too embarrassing for me at the time, and I wasn't ready to tell people that I could hear a still small voice in my head. When I went to tell my parents, I was actually hoping they would be rather proud of me, considering all the military history that our family has had. They weren't really that excited, though. My mother would break into tears, of course. And my father, well, the best he could tell me was, "Can't you see that this is upsetting your mother? It's making her cry." But you see, he had drilled into me quite well through both Bible stories and his own example that even though family should still be important, by comparison to God, family shouldn't be important at all. Like, if you have to choose between serving God and abandoning your family, you choose God. Whatever God says for you to do. Whatever He wants you to do, if it's against your family, you do what God says. That's what I was trained to believe, and that is how I acted in that moment. I was unshakable even by my own parents, because they had taught me that well. And if I didn't mention it before, I had told them. They were the only ones that I had told for a very long time. And they had never made it public, but they were the first and only ones I told for a very long time that I could hear God speaking to me. And I used the same Bible passages that I shared with you to my reasoning, and my father could not tell me that I was wrong. He agreed, basically. He didn't really run with it. He didn't make a big deal out of it. I don't know if he thought I was crazy. I don't know if he told anyone else about it. Probably told someone, knowing him. But it was never made a big deal. It was never brought up back to me again. So, and I used that God had directly told me He wanted me to join the United States Marines. So, now, I had no idea what I was really doing when working out. Being homeschooled, the only exercise I'd really gotten growing up was going on public transportation from place to place while living in the mission field. And then the exercise drastically dropped once we moved to the United States, because we could drive everywhere. We didn't need public transportation. And then on top of that, what exercise I did do in the States after that, it really wasn't much. The most was joining an intramural basketball team, and we just showed up and played the games. There was no practice or anything like that. Nothing Nothing great. And nothing regular or consistent. No coaching, no working out with other people. I occasionally would try to go to the gym and work on myself, but that was just for me. I didn't have a driving passion for it. But now I had a huge reason to work on myself. And I was about 125 kilos or 275 pounds in this picture, taken back when I was 15 or 16. Wasn't quite that heavy later on when I decided that I would be joining the Marines. But I was still a good bit out of shape and quite physically weak. So I went on a rather crazy diet that helped shed a lot of weight. It's not a very healthy diet, but maybe we can talk about that and the other things that I've learned about working out in a completely separate video some other time. But I did my best on my own that I could anyways. I looked up YouTube videos. I even built a pull-up bar in my backyard because pull-ups are a real bitch to try and get good at. And I would go to gatherings of the other people joining the military. They called us poolies. We would get together, work out, and do whatever exercises the recruiters had us do. And they would sometimes try to simulate what we would be expecting in boot camp. I even took some time to focus on working out before signing up for the military to give myself extra time to get ready. And during that time was the time when I worked a few of my first jobs, which will have to be talked about in another video some other time, because those were some experiences as well. And I was also visiting the group that I had been with the previous year, the other Christian guys, and working with them and helping them out when I could. And I did some traveling with them, although it was mostly when they were in close enough range to where I could drive to go meet them myself. And so with all this time that I had taken to prepare myself before signing up and just the lengths that I went to, I was more than sure that I would make it through boot camp just fine. I had no worries about failing. I was doing my best. I knew it for sure. My best. It wasn't as good as it could have been, and I know that now. But for the time, considering what little I knew and what I was learning, I was doing really well, and I was fairly proud of myself. But I still knew that I had some serious disadvantages going in, because I had been homeschooled. I had had such a strange and different background, and everyone else who was going into the military had a significantly more physically active lifestyle than I had ever had. And so, but this didn't bother me though, because I had faith that whatever I couldn't cover, that God would take care of the rest, that God would help me, enable me, give me extra strength where I needed, help me understand things that I needed to, that I might struggle with. I expected Him to help me, as long as I was doing my best and staying committed. And I would have no problem getting through boot camp and being a good Christian testimony in the Marines. Looking back now, it's a wonder to me that they actually let me join. I certainly would not have let me in if I was the recruiter. But I passed everything, even the physical requirements to get in. I was about 21, 22 at the time. Not really quite sure. I'm terrible with dates. But I will forever remember that the day I got on the bus to go to Paris Island was February 8th. It was pitch dark when we arrived. And I was so nervous, but also so excited and full of adrenaline. I remember getting yelled at while getting out of my seat and filing out of the bus with everyone else and coming to stand on those yellow footprints. And as soon as I was in my spot, once I was in my set of yellow footprints, I remember feeling the rush, as I thought, this is where I am meant to be. I am fulfilling my mission from God. I'm on the right track, and I'm going to be a warrior for him on a literal battlefield. Probably. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was actually rather excited about it. I would have been happy to die for God and for country. And you remember how I said that I thought I was prepared for joining the Marines? I thought I had everything covered. Well, I found out the hard way that there's really nothing that can prepare you for boot camp. In fact, now that I think about it, I think I understand why only the Marines call their basic training boot camp. A lot of getting your ass kicked. But as much of a shock as it was for me, I did my best to take to it like a fish to water. And there were things I really did enjoy about being there. Not everything, obviously, but I enjoyed learning the Marine Corps martial arts. I really enjoyed the drilling and the marching, believe it or not. I even liked the food. And, of course, going to church every Sunday. But otherwise, it was a living hell most of the time. I made quite a number of mistakes. Being introverted, it made it all the harder to speak up and ask for clarification or help on things, and well, I got in trouble a lot. Probably the biggest reason behind why I would get in trouble when I would is because there would be phrases, things they were facts that we were supposed to be learning, and they would be said in a cadence sort of fashion that you would typically run to or march to. And there were times, a lot of times actually, when the drill instructor would yell that I couldn't understand what he said. But it seemed like everyone else understood perfectly what he had said. And they all had to yell it back to him. If I didn't know what the drill instructor had said, I felt like I couldn't make noise because I didn't know I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to make myself blend in, so I just ended up mouthing the words along with everyone else and not making any sound. And I repeatedly got in trouble for that. The more I tried to stay out of trouble, it seemed like the more I got into it. When I wasn't doing mountain climbers, I was running around the platoon as we would march from place to place, or during breaks between our time being educated in the classroom, I would get to visit the sand pits or the sandboxes quite a bit. Basically, it was like a massive rectangle of Lincoln logs with a bunch of sand in it, where drill instructors would take their recruits to punish them and make them exercise in the sand. And you'd be picking out sand from your uniform. Practically the rest of the time you'd be in boot camp. So the vast majority of the time I felt exhausted and run ragged. And it didn't really help that I found out later there was a drill instructor that enjoyed spending time with me a lot, yelling at me a lot, saying my name, my last name derogatively a lot. I can still hear him. But I found out later that this particular drill instructor was not fond of people who were taller than him. And I am almost 2 meters tall, about 6'4". So I'm taller than most people. And in addition to that, working out is by itself is hard enough the taller and bigger you naturally are. So pushing a towel across the floor while doing mountain climbers, look that exercise up. It's a difficult exercise to get good at when you have, well, when over half your body length consists of legs, such as does mine. But he couldn't break me. Oh no, I was reading my Bible every day, finding time to do it, even after lights out if I had to, and I was doing my very best to keep my head in the game no matter what, and to not be discouraged by what the drill instructors would say to me, because they don't want a bunch of fucking pussies in the Marine Corps. But of course I believed that I was no pussy, and that I could make it through. And I stayed strong. Until I got sick. I got bronchitis. And it's actually very common for recruits to get sick while in boot camp. Sickness gets around quite a bit there, but they do their best. They had us washing our hands quite regularly, using hand sanitizer. They did their absolute best, but you've got that many people working in that small of an area and working out a lot. Shit happens. People will still get sick regardless. And I got pretty sick. It wasn't super terrible. I got better from it. But it ended up costing me. Because you see, it was a mistake to a degree to go to the medical bay. Because when you go to the medical bay, you miss out on half to 3/4 of what you would have learned that day if you weren't sick and if you had stayed with your platoon. But I had gotten pretty ridiculously sick. I was coughing non-stop. I had a lot of mucus in my lungs. Bronchitis is not fun to have, let me tell you. And running around coughing all that phlegm up and it running out my fucking face, it was a fucking disaster. It was gross. It's like having a waterfall of slime sometimes. It just I had to do something about it. So of course I went to the medical bay, but apparently I spent too much time there, because with how I was doing previously and then going 1 or 2 days too many to the medical bay, by that point it was nearly the end of the first phase of boot camp. There were 3 phases that you have to go through in order to become a Marine. And the bronchitis had hit me roughly about 3/4 of the way into the first phase. And while it hit me pretty hard, once I recovered, I actually started improving after I was back to full health. I was getting into a better zone. I had actually unlocked some things that I didn't realize about working out. I didn't know about until this point, but I finally figured some things out: how to pace myself, how to regulate my breathing, and things like that, and it was really helping me out. And even my head drill instructor tried to vouch for me, but unfortunately I had missed out too much. I hadn't done well enough. I had missed too many days, or too much educational time with my platoon, and the decision was made to recycle me, to have me start over from the beginning. Now, this was discouraging a bit at first, but you see, the recruits on Parris Island are divided into 3 groups of platoons, multiple platoons per group, and I had been assigned to the most difficult group of platoons. And I was told that I would be getting moved to one of the easier groups of platoons. So that made me think, well, this could actually be the perfect opportunity for me, because I can learn everything that I missed out on before, and the little bit of improvement that I was doing right before getting recycled, well, that's going to help me do even better now. So I wasn't too worried about the change. And plus, on top of that, if this was going to be a bit easier environment to work in, then I thought perhaps the drill instructors would be a little bit more helpful in helping me learn those things that I miss out on and struggle to understand. But that's not how it happened. I was shuffled around here and there because they had to wait for a new fresh batch of recruits to come in before I could be assigned to them, and they had to go through their processing before I could join in. And I hadn't been there very long when one of the drill instructors started pulling me away from the other recruits, because you've already heard this lesson before. And I was still too terrified of drill instructors to try to speak up to them, to tell them how I felt and that I would have really liked to relearn everything, that I really needed it. But the thing is, there are 4 drill instructors per platoon. There's the head drill instructor, and he is your best friend while you are there on Paris Island. He is the one that will vouch for you and tell you how well you're doing, if you're doing well enough to deserve any praise, that is. And then there's the other 3 lower drill instructors who are under him. They are the ones you spend the majority of your time with. They are the ones who act like your enemies and try to make you quit. They try to psychologically break you. And you do not want to say no to these guys, because they will eat you alive. Not literally, but they will make you feel the pain. So I was still too scared to speak up to these guys, and I just went along with the drill instructor. And he would have me do workouts somewhere separate from the recruits, or he would take me to the head, the bathroom, and just have me run a towel across the slick porcelain floor in the mountain climber position, back and forth, back and forth. And would try and tell me to go faster and faster. It happened multiple times. I even got ridiculed quite a bit for being a recycled recruit. I thought that wouldn't happen, but it totally did. Even by drill instructors who weren't affiliated with my platoon. They would come over during PT while I would be running, and they would sometimes come over and talk shit to me, try and break me. But it was that mountain climber exercise that was the worst. It was the absolute worst for me. I hated it. I put up with it as much as I could. But I spent a good bit of time with that drill instructor, going back and forth across that bathroom floor, getting worn out, exhausted. Till finally, something kicked in. I'd had enough. And I stopped. And I started to just repeat over and over again. I quit. I said it about 4 or 5 times before I felt like I came back to myself. I remembered why I was there. I remembered I was on a mission. I was supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to quit. Quitting was never an option. And I tried to take it back. It was too late. They called the military police. They made the other recruits stand around and watch while I was handcuffed and made an example of. It was by far the most embarrassing and humiliating event of my life. And there was a lot of processing to do. A lot of paperwork had to be changed. And it took about a month before I left. By the time I did leave, it had been about 3 months total. To where if I hadn't gotten sick and I hadn't done so poorly, I would have been graduating by the time I was getting on the bus as a quitter. And it was tremendously depressing. I felt so worthless. And I begged God to forgive me over and over again. Of course, God is a forgiving and loving God, as according to the Bible. The voice was not angry with me. But I was. There was one small bit of hope, and that was if I waited about a year or two, that I could try to join again and come back. And I was really banking on that being my second chance. I waited the year, battled depression throughout. But I waited the allotted amount of time, kept myself in shape and everything, went back, and, well, the status of the military was that they had more than enough people. It was, at the time, a lot of people were joining the military as a career, for a job, because it was far easier and paid a good bit better than a lot of other jobs that were available. So even the Marine Corps was swamped with new people. And my recruiter told me, same one that I'd went through before, he told me, say, look, I'm sorry, but really the only way they're going to allow people to come back and try again is if aliens invade and wipe out a whole bunch of troops at once and we are in desperate need. Sorry, but that's pretty much the only way you're going to be able to get back in. And that crushed me. Very much so. And my depression really spiked after I found out that there was no going back to the Marines. I had made such a big talk in the name of God. I had told people that I was in the Marine Corps because I believed it's where God wanted me to be. Both before going in, to church people, friends. I wasn't bragging about it, it was just an introvert's way of making conversation, just answering questions they asked. A lot of people knew. And then there was all the people in boot camp that I told. The drill instructor that hated me even knew. And I had failed my part miserably. I felt so worthless. I felt like I was, like there was no reason for me to keep on living. I felt like I had disgraced God so much that I was better off dead. There's even a Bible verse where Jesus says, "In my Father's house are many mansions," and the implication is that He has a mansion, or God has a mansion for every one of His children in heaven. And I didn't even care about that. I was just tired of disgracing God to such ridiculous proportions that I felt like I didn't even deserve a mansion. I would have been happy being a fucking hobo in heaven. I seriously considered suicide. I considered it as a viable option. And if it wasn't for my best friend, Salem, I wouldn't be here telling you this right now. Salem had his own demons, and we'd become so close by this point. We'd been best friends for almost 7 years by the time we had this conversation. And he told me he wouldn't know how he'd be able to live if I died. And for the time being, that was enough to keep me from killing myself. I managed to pull enough of myself together and to pray and ask God for another chance. And yes, I got an answer again. And this time, the voice was telling me who I should marry. Yes, you're gonna have to wait till next week to hear about that. And before I end this video, I just want to say I have absolutely no hard feelings towards those drill instructors, or any for that matter. I didn't belong. I was a weak person back then, in more ways than one. But going through that experience, and even going through the embarrassing moments and everything, it helped make me who I am today. I'm a lot stronger and wiser than I was back then. And before I end this video, I just want to say I have absolutely no hard feelings towards those drill instructors, or any for that matter. I didn't belong. I was a weak person back then, in more ways than one. But going through that experience, and even going through the embarrassing moments and everything, it helped make me who I am today. And I wouldn't be as nearly as strong or as wise if it wasn't for those drill instructors. So now here's a question for you. If your country suddenly decided to have a draft, what branch would you choose and why? I think if I were born in the US and had a bit more normal life, with regular physical activities, going to school and such like that, I would have to go with the Marine Corps again. Because to be honest, they're just some badass motherfuckers. But be sure to tell me what branch you would choose in the comments down below. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't. Anyways, till next time my friends, farewell.